This is one of the most versatile builds in all of Destiny, with its unrivaled ability to keep you alive, tanky, and healthy, while simultaneously rendering all of your enemies slowed, shattered, and slaughtered. It's one of those builds that you want to know every fine detail about, because in addition to its potent crowd control, quintuple 100 stat point capabilities, and mind-blowing ability regeneration, it can completely shut down any champion in the game weapons free, making Grandmaster Nightfalls and Master Raids an absolute breeze. And just like the last video, I'm giving away one GDS89 emblem code to a random subscriber that comments down below for every 5,000 likes this video gets. So be sure to subscribe, like, and comment if you haven't already. And if you want to view the full build as you follow along, or be able to reference it on demand at any point in time, I've partnered with Mobalytics to provide you with full written infographic build guides based on my videos, like the Stasis Hunter one you are viewing today, that can be found using the link in the description below. But trust me when I say that you'll still want to make sure you watch this entire video, as understanding the build inside and out is of paramount importance. The whole build begins with our DUSKFIELD grenade, a throwable object that creates a slowing field on impact that will inflict any enemies that linger for just 1 second with the freeze debuff, rendering them completely disabled for 6 seconds or until shot out. Although, as we walk through this build, you will be made known to a whole myriad of methods that will further empower this grenade itself, as well as the bonus buffs and effects that it can grant to us. First, however, we must talk about our melee ability, Withering Blade, a ricocheting frozen shuriken that can hit up to 4 enemies, applying 60 stacks of slow to any enemy it hits. Keep in mind that because this melee ability intrinsically has 2 charges, and that because enemies become frozen at 100 stacks of slow, launching 2 of these will instantly freeze any non-boss enemy for a full 6 seconds. And similar to our DUSKFIELD grenade, we will soon talk about a whole slew of ways to gain additional benefits from our melee ability. And because of how many perks this ability will bring to us down the line, you'll of course want to opt into the Gambler's Dodge class ability to instantly refresh a full charge of your Withering Blade when dodging near enemies. All 3 of these abilities are incredibly strong in their own right, and it is for that very reason that we want to ensure that they are available as often as possible, made feasible by the Frosty's Hunter Boots, our exotic armor piece of choice for this build, which grant us 100% increased melee and grenade energy regeneration rate and 3.5% of our total dodge per second while sprinting. Now, these aren't the flashiest exotic boots in the game, but with the 100% uptime on the bonuses they provide, they are incredibly potent and powerful when considering the benefits they provide over a long period of time. And what's more is that they increase the strength of one of the main fragments of this build to a ridiculous degree, further justifying their occupation of our exotic slot. Although I know for certain many of you might be considering the Renewal Grasp's exotic gloves as an alternate option to this Stasis Hunter ensemble, the merits of which I will extrapolate on later in the video. However, for now, we want to look at the 2 aspects that will set the foundation for us to take this Stasis Frosty's Hunter build to a whole new level. The first of these 2 aspects is Grim Harvest, which creates stasis shards at the location of defeated, slowed, and frozen targets, which, amongst other benefits provided by our upcoming fragments, can be scavenged by you or your allies to refund you melee energy. The biggest benefit of this aspect, however, is the 3 fragment slots that it grants, allowing for a lot of additional power-ups and perks in this build. And providing another 2 fragment slots for a total of 5 is our second aspect, Touch of Winter, which increases the slow field size of our DUSKFIELD grenade and creates a small stasis crystal at the center of the grenade on impact. This small stasis crystal generated by our Touch of Winter empowered DUSKFIELD grenades is one of the 3 key components of this Stasis Hunter build, with the second key component being our first fragment, the Whisper of Chains, which grants a 40% damage resistance buff when within 10 meters of a frozen enemy or stasis crystal. The final key component of this build is our second fragment, the Whisper of Shards, which grants us 6 seconds of 500% increased grenade regeneration for every destroyed friendly stasis crystal, stacking up to 10 seconds. And what's more is that the effects of this fragment are doubled when used in conjunction with the grenade regeneration buff from Frosties, granting you access to a permanent 6-second grenade cooldown timer that will only become even more efficient with our mods coming up. But first we need to discuss our other 3 fragments, beginning with the Whisper of Durance, which increases the duration of all slowing sources and debuffs by 2 seconds, specifically taking our Dustfield Grenade slowing zone from 7 to 9 seconds, our Squall Tornado from our Silence and Squall Super from 14 to 16 seconds, and the slow debuff itself from 2 to 4 seconds. After that is the Whisper of Hedrons, which upon freezing any enemy grants an 11-second buff that grants us a 60-point increase to mobility, resilience, and recovery, and an increase to weapon stability, aim assist, and airborne effectiveness. Considering that you have your grenade up about every 6 seconds and 2 Withering Blades to freeze enemies, you effectively have this buff up permanently, allowing you to invest your stat points into other stats to practically have a quintuple 100 stat build. And if those weren't enough buffs, our final fragment, the Whisper of Rime, grants chunks of healing and overshield for every scavenged stasis shard, which we of course create from Grim Harvest when defeating any slowed or frozen enemy, which is basically all of them. And to top it all off, this build becomes borderline perfection after incorporating our mod setup, starting on the helmet with an Elemental Siphon mod matching your primary ammo weapon element to generate orbs of power on weapon multi-kills. You'll also want to slot Reaper into your class item to generate an orb of power on your first weapon final blow after activating your class ability. Picking up these orbs will grant us a whole slew of benefits thanks to mods like our 2 copies of Absolution to refund energy to all 3 of our basic abilities on orb pickup, and better already to immediately begin health regeneration when picking up an orb of power. Picking up these orbs will also grant you stacks of armor charge to fuel grenade kickstart on the gloves, which consumes all armor charge stacks to refund a portion of grenade energy on grenade activation, scaling with the number of armor charge stacks currently in your possession. Inflicting damage of any kind with your grenade will also provide additional benefits through bolstering detonation on the arms to refund 20% of your class ability when dealing grenade damage with a 7-second activation cooldown. However, since the damaging and slowing field from our Duskfield grenade lasts for 9 seconds thanks to the Whisper of Durance, you'll be able to easily proc this mod twice per grenade activation, and that refunded class ability energy is going to be incredibly useful thanks to class item mods like Distribution to refund energy to all 3 basic abilities when dodging near enemies, and Bomber to refund a large chunk of grenade energy when dodging in general. And finally, to round off this core mod setup, you'll want Impact Induction on the gloves to provide a 20% refund to your grenade whenever dealing melee damage of any kind with a 7-second activation cooldown, which synergizes incredibly well with your 2 charges of Withering Blade to safely proc this mod from a distance at any point in time. You'll then complement this core mod setup with things like Finders and Scouts on the helmet, Resists and Reserves on the chest, and stat mods on all 5 pieces, prioritizing stats in the lower half of the bracket like Discipline, Intellect, and Strength, since you have a basically permanent 60 stat point boost to your top 3 stats at all times. Although I wouldn't fault you for wanting tier 10 resilience to guarantee a minimum of 32% damage resistance at all times if you would prefer that route. And as always, you can copy every single one of these abilities, aspects, fragments, and mods to your Guardian in just one click using Destiny Item Manager, or find my written infographic guide version of this build on Mobalytics both linked in the description below. And if having convenient access to all of the best builds in Destiny is something that sounds beneficial to you, then I can guarantee that subscribing to my channel will improve your Destiny experience exponentially. But with every good build must also come a rundown of how to best put it to use. Like I said before, one of the core strengths of this build is its ability to permanently stun any champion in any activity, allowing you to completely ignore seasonal champion weapon mods and run a loadout of your choosing at all times. This is thanks to the fact that the slowing debuff, coming from our Duskfield grenades and Withering blades, instantly stuns overload champions. Additionally, the Shatter buff, which procs when damaging a frozen target, again made possible through our Duskfield grenade and Withering blades, will instantly stun unstoppable champions. And although Stasis doesn't technically stun barrier champions, the repeating freezing effect from our Duskfield grenade will result in a barrier champion's shield immediately disappearing on freeze, rendering it completely useless. Now that you understand everything this build is capable of, it's time to talk about the general usage goals and core ability rotations. You'll of course begin every engagement with your grenade to lock down the field and freeze up the most lethal pack of enemies. You'll then aim to prioritize killing the enemies rather than your Stasis shard to proc your Whisper of Shards grenade regeneration, as the shatter damage from killing the frozen enemies will destroy the crystal to grant you your buff anyways. From there, if able to do so, you'll want to sprint towards those fallen foes to not only double up on your Whisper of Shards grenade regeneration from Frosties, but to also collect the Stasis shards to refund any missing melee energy and to acquire healing and overshields from Whisper of RIME. In the event that you are lacking any grenade energy after executing this base rotation, you can of course compensate with on-demand energy refund from melee damage thanks to impact induction, dodging thanks to bomber and distribution, and orb pickup thanks to absolution. It's also incredibly important to recognize the two very different ways you can use your Duskfield grenade. Its primary use case is one of offensive nature, preemptively freezing up and putting down enemies before they can come anywhere near you. However, there is an incredibly strong defensive manner in which this grenade can be used, such as cutting off a choke point to retreat and regain your health, or even throwing it next to you to acquire the extra 40% damage resistance while near the Stasis crystal generated from Touch of Winter thanks to the Whisper of Chains. And in addition to consistently leveraging your rapid grenade cooldown to lace the battlefield with freezing domes, you'll also want to be sure you make consistent use of your melee ability whenever you have 2 full charges available to further enable your Stasis shard generation and therefore Whisper of RIME overshielding capabilities and extra grenade refund through impact induction. You'll also want to be sure to do the same with your class ability as well, not only to refund melee charges from the ability itself and ability energy thanks to your mods, but also to activate Reaper to generate an orb of power on your next weapon final blow, which remember can be scavenged for additional ability energy and instant health regeneration. And if you want some solid weapon pairings with this setup, I'd recommend 2 specific perks to be on the lookout for. The first is of course Demolitionist to refund 10% of your grenade on weapon final blows and to fully reload your Demolitionist weapon on grenade activation. The other perk I recommend you track down is HEADSTONE, which creates a Stasis shard at the location of defeated enemies on precision final blows, which of course can be destroyed to further increase the ways for you to proc Whisper of Chains for massive grenade energy regeneration. Unfortunately, no weapon can roll both of these perks at the same time since they both occupy the same perk slot. However, you can't go wrong with either one. Personally, I like HEADSTONE a little bit more for this build in particular, however it is completely up to you depending on what options you have available. If you want to see specific weapons containing these perks that I personally recommend, you can find those in the Mobalytics guide using the link in the description down below. Now, as I said before, Renewal Grasps are a solid option for the Stasis Hunter, and a fellow well-respected build crafter named Dorverich has a fantastic video on that setup that I've linked in the description down below. However, at the end of the day, you really can't go wrong with either the Renewal Grasps or Frosties, and I highly recommend adding both setups to your build arsenal. If there was ever a build to impress your friends and clannies, these Frozen Assassin setups are just the ones. I hope you enjoyed today's build viewing experience as much as you enjoy using the build in game. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed your time and want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.